Alex Mozet, and welcome to Winner Take All, where we talk about the constant battle to fight back and win against big tech. Today, we've got a really amazing guest joining us. We have Salih Hudayar, who is the Prime Minister of the East Turkistan Government-in-Exile. Salih, great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't we just kind of start at the top of what is East Turkestan for our viewers that maybe aren't familiar, and what's some of the story there about why you're the Prime Minister of a government in exile and what that means?
So East Turkestan is the homeland of Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and other Turkic peoples. It's been the homeland of the Indo-European and Turkic peoples for roughly about 6,000 years. It wasn't until 1877 that the late Manchu Qing dynasty invaded East Turkestan, and then in 1884 they renamed it to Xinjiang, meaning the colony or the new territory in the Chinese language. With the fall of the Manchu Qing dynasty in 1911, the people of East Turkestan, they started their national movements, and there were attempts in 1912 to declare independence, but it was brutally crushed. However, in 1933, we declared independence as the Republic of East Turkestan, or the East Turkestan Republic. And due to Soviet intervention, it was brutally crushed as well within roughly 6 months. Then in 1944, a decade later, we declared independence again on the same date, November 12th. And we were able to maintain our independence until December 22nd, 1949. When the People's Republic of China, aided by the Soviet Union, they invaded East Turkestan, occupied our country, and overthrew our government, leading to the past 72 years a brutal campaign of colonization, forced assimilation, genocide, and occupation. Attempts by our former government officials of the East Turkestan Republic to create a government in exile. Many of them had fled to what is now Kazakhstan, or then the Soviet Union. Unfortunately, the Soviets were not going to allow us to host weren't willing to host a government in exile in their territory. So it wasn't until 1992, after the fall of the Soviet Union, that excuse me, that attempts to reestablish or to establish a government in exile, kicked off again. And this time it was in Istanbul, and the Turkish government, due to various reasons, was not willing to host a government in exile, but they were willing to host the East Turkestan National Congress. But by late 1990s, the Turkish government was receiving a lot of pressure from the Chinese government, forcing our leadership and others to flee to the West, to the United States, Europe, and Canada. And it was in 2004 that we were able to convince people here in the United States to allow us to establish our government in exile here in Washington, D.C.
Interesting. And so that's something approved by, like, who approves that? I guess what approvals come with that? Is that like the Secretary of State or something? Like, I'm curious how that works, what that means.
Well, so we actually, when we declared the government in exile, we actually had a conference in the U.S. Capitol building, and shortly after that conference is when we declared our government in exile. The U.S. government, officially the State Department, it was in November, 2 months after we declared our government in exile, because of a lot of Chinese, diplomatic protests by the Chinese government. They issued a statement stating that, yes, we heard that there was a government in exile established here, but the U.S. government doesn't, support it. And we've, managed to continue, our existence here in the United States. And because the United States is also, a democratic country where, it respects freedom, it respects, law, There wasn't really any laws or anything against us creating a government in exile, so it was, tacitly approved.
Yes, they've tolerated it, and we are still the beacon of freedom, which is good. We're not doing so great these days on upholding freedom. I guess we're still at the head of the pack. Just it's kind of easy to take that flag these days. Really interesting. You are the prime minister of this government in exile. We have heard many stories about, even including in the New York Times, did a big expose maybe a year or two ago about the CCP's basically what they call them re-education camps. They remind me of concentration camps in the tune of millions of Uyghurs. Communist dictators don't really appreciate religion of any sort. And so, we've seen those stories. We've covered those stories on the show, and just how terrible that is. From your perch, you had the New York Times cover this, right? Obviously, that story didn't get any coverage in China because they control all the, content platforms, social media platforms. Do you think that story was suppressed by big tech, US big tech, right? Like, should that have gotten more coverage than it did? How's the coverage been of big tech of the travesties which have been carried out against the people of East Turkestan and the Uyghur community?
Big tech, whether it's, big tech, the companies, or even like the owners and CEOs and other people involved in running big tech, they have been actually very silent. There has been a lot of self-censorship. Some of these big tech owners, they have shares in various media entities here in the United States and elsewhere. So they have, been self-censoring in order to appease China. While, the New York Times, as you stated, they published it, these documents. They at the same time, hid the most important, components of those documents and failed to, publish those, fearing that it would, upset China and its leaders.
Okay, so they watered it down. Well, that's interesting. Maybe we'll get to that later. If you go on interviews like this interview, for example, do you think YouTube's going to come after us? Like, is your voice being muted from, the social media platforms, the content platforms, that kind of stuff?
We haven't had any problems in terms of YouTube. Initially, we did have some problems. They were, removing some of our videos, and we reached out to them, and we were able to resolve that issue. Twitter has been great. We are having some, problems in terms with Facebook. It won't let us run, certain ads, and even, we're not appearing on the search results as we should.
Oh, that's interesting. So on Google search, I think you're talking about, the search results are not surfacing, all the information, or they're punting you down to the, bottom of first page, second page, that kind of stuff. Facebook kind of not giving as much coverage to certain topics, banning, ads, those kinds of things. All that, unfortunately, kind of seems par for the course. Frankly, I'm not surprised. Doesn't make it okay.
Facebook lets, the Chinese government, its state media and various entities run ads on Facebook, denying the ongoing genocide. Yet when we try to run a simple, ad inviting people to a certain event or a demonstration, Facebook doesn't allow that to be run. So it's. I just wanted to point out this double standard in terms of Facebook.
And by the way, we're doing this interview over Skype, not Zoom. Zoom, obviously, the Chinese government listens to all the calls on Zoom. Any run-ins with Zoom?
I personally have not used Zoom because, again, for security reasons and the fact that, I'm trying to boycott all goods and services that are made in China, especially those that are, affiliated in one way or another with the Chinese government.
Zoom likes to say American company, even though that's not true. TikTok, on the other hand, very clear. Chinese company through and through. TikTok definitely, right? Helping to promote China's view or the CCP's view of what they want people to think is going on over there. Any stories you have about TikTok?
Yeah, I mean, you know, a lot of TikTokers that were sympathetic about the Uyghurs, you know, they try to post videos in TikTok. Many of them, you know, have been removed. Their videos have been removed. Some have even been suspended. And in, you know, TikTok's Chinese version or Douyin, like, for example, some of the videos showing the forced transfer of Uyghurs, the forced labor of Uyghurs, you know, had been uploaded on the Chinese version of TikTok. And as soon as we, you know, tried to highlight that, they all got removed. Those accounts were deleted. These are the types of things that, you know, TikTok is doing, trying to, you know, censor and hide evidence, you know, that of what's going on by people that are posting it in East Turkestan. And then outside of East Turkestan, across the world, you know, people like average people who are just trying to, you know, inform others, they are taking down their videos and they're censoring them as well.
Yeah, and then they send the 50 Cent Army after you, which we've gotten, our videos have gotten 50 Cent Army. We talk about 50 Cent Army on the show a lot, but there, I mean, the 50 Cent Army probably has like a whole wing. There's probably a whole department. I say it jokingly. It's not funny. I don't mean to make jest of it because it really is a travesty what's happening to, you know, to the Uyghurs and in East Turkestan here. But I guarantee there's probably like a small army of people in the 50 Cent Army in China, and all they do is comment and try to shape public opinion, you know, in away from having people think anything bad is actually happening over there, right? I mean, it has to be a massive force of labor to do this at the scale they're doing it.
Yes, you know, like the 50 Cent Army, I mean, like in certain videos that we posted, you know, there was an event in, I believe, 2019 or 2020 where I spoke at the Committee on the Present Danger here in Washington, D.C., and we took that clip of my speech, and as soon as we uploaded it onto our Facebook page, within less than half an hour, we had 4,000, you know, troll comments by, you know, the 50 Cent Army, just, you know, trying to call us liars, all these different things.
I mean, it is impressive and scary how good of a job China does to control this kind of information narrative. On the show, we talk about it, that we are actually in an information warfare currently, right? We are at war. It's an information warfare today, not tomorrow, but today we are in it. I just, you know, a lot of people don't know. I will say on the positive side, many, I think tens of millions of Americans are waking up to the fact that they are trying to be controlled, you know, by forces like the CCP, by big tech, by the mainstream media. And, you know, that to me is the silver lining, but it is crazy to think about the amount of resources that China is going to try and shape this narrative around the Uyghurs and what's going on in East Turkestan.
Yes, I mean, the East Turkestan problem, as I mentioned, you know, it's been an ongoing problem. It's part of the ongoing Sino East Turkestan conflict that has been waging for the past 100 years. And East Turkestan, which I forgot to mention, is roughly 1,828,418 square kilometers, or roughly 2.5 the size of the state of Texas. It's rich in natural and mineral resources from oil, natural gas, coal, uranium, gold, silver, copper, tungsten, and even, you know, Bitcoin. Much of Bitcoin's mining is actually happening in East Turkestan, which many people don't know about. Even, you know, the polysilicon, which is used for, you know, solar power, building, you know, solar energy. Over 20% of the world's supply comes from East Turkestan alone. Over 80% of China's cotton, you know, production, which is roughly about 22% of the world's cotton production, comes from East Turkestan alone. And it's the cornerstone of China's, you know, grandiose plan for global, domination, the Belt and Road Initiative. The East Turkestan is the cornerstone of that. And this is why when Xi Jinping in 2013, when he unveiled the Belt and Road Initiative and his goals for rejuvenating the Chinese nation and achieving the Chinese dream, he started by labeling Uyghurs as terrorists, as barbarians, and as weeds that needed to be eradicated. And this is where in 2014 you had the start of essentially these concentration camps where millions of people were slowly being locked up in.
There's really no justification for what they're doing. I mean, there can't be any justification for what they're doing with these camps. Is there any positive role that, let's say, U.S. or non-Chinese tech companies are playing in this fight against the CCP, whether in China or outside of China? Like, is it even possible for any non-Chinese tech companies to influence any sort of opinion or enable any sort of communication inside of China? Like, I mean, you probably don't even want to tell me if there is, right? Because then they'll go and shut it down. But is there any positive here from how Western tech platforms have been able to help you accomplish your goals?
So one of the things I can only think of one, real example, and this is the Chinese government has been effectively, trying to not only, destroy our culture, but also our language, and as part of its ongoing genocide. And there was never, a Uyghur. Google didn't have Uyghur as part of his, Google Translate platform. But they recently, I believe it was last year, that they were finally able to put the Uyghur language into the Google Translate. And this also helps, the many Uyghurs that cannot, that doesn't understand, English. Like in the United States, for example, we have about 10 to 15,000 Uyghurs out of our diaspora of over 1.5 million, and majority of Uyghurs, they can't get their voices heard, so everybody just writes in Uyghur. But now this will enable having Uyghur Translate in Google. This will enable their stories to be read by anyone really, even whether it's posts, letters, whatever it is on social media. People can just copy and paste that, put it into Google Translate, and understand what the Uyghurs are going through, what they're saying, and vice versa. It helps Uyghurs who don't understand English, and vice versa, read what certain news and understand what how the international community is reacting to our issue.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good example. I like that. Some positivity, always good to have some positivity and optimism. And so let's kind of shift a little bit to the Olympics. The Olympics are coming up, and you are leading a boycott against the Olympics, which I must say I actually love for my own selfish reasons. I want to hear your reasons, and then eventually I'll get to my reasons also. But why are you boycotting the Chinese Winter Olympics?
Right now, we're facing a genocide. I mean, there is no doubt what's going on is a genocide. The U.S. government has recognized it as a genocide. Parliaments of the U.K., France, Belgium, Canada, Netherlands, Lithuania, and the Czech Republic have recognized it as a genocide. Just on Tuesday, the Japanese Parliament also passed a weak resolution stating that they were concerned about the atrocities that the Chinese government was doing, particularly the mass internment of Uyghurs. So with this, knowing that knowing that this is happening, it's morally wrong and unethical for want the IOC to have given, the allowing China to host the Olympics. We tried to call the IOC, to the International Olympic Committee, to relocate it to a better country. The other two contenders were Oslo, Norway, perfect, like they have a near perfect human rights record. Another one, Almaty, Kazakhstan, while theirs is not as near as, as near perfect as, or not anywhere near perfect, so much better, they're much better alternative than, the Chinese government that's waging a genocide. We didn't try to call on, governments, individual governments to engage in full diplomatic boycotts, but it turned out to be weak diplomatic boycotts. We tried to get, athletes and specific individual, national teams to drop out of it, and they pretty much ignored our calls. And now we're calling on the general public to, join our campaign that we launched about 2 weeks ago, to boycott watching the Beijing Olympics and to make it, the least watched Olympics, to protest the ongoing genocide that's happening in East Turkestan against Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples.
You wouldn't think this kind of stuff in this day and age would happen. A, B, if it does happen, be tolerated, and C, just kind of how easy it is for people, politicians, leaders, etc., to just kind of turn a blind eye to the just completely inexcusable actions by the CCP against the Uyghurs. Not to mention, by the way, talk about COVID, talk about how irresponsible China acted throughout this whole pandemic and has refused to take accountability, refused to be transparent. It is this same kind of behavior, just the mentality, right? The rules do not apply to them. Humanity, what it means to be humane, does not apply to them. And by them, I mean the CCP. And they're getting away with it, right? And probably because they're just bribing and corrupting the entire globe, including, unfortunately, I think a large part of our US government on both sides of the political aisle. I really do appreciate, Salih, the fight that you are taking on your shoulders here. And I can imagine you probably have some dark days and you wonder, how do you keep going? I'd say my positive view on it is it may not be seen in the politicians and the public figures, but I do think tens of millions of Americans are waking up, are recognizing the wrongdoing that China is doing and the CCP is doing, whether it's with the Uyghurs, whether it's in terms of how they've handled COVID, all of that mixed together. And the people, and so that's why I like you appealing to the general public. I think the people, you'd be surprised. I actually think a lot more people in this country than maybe you would think would wholeheartedly support exactly what you're talking about.
No, the people have been great. And this is why, even to get the genocide recognition, to get the U.S. government, it took us 3 years. And so we, appealed to the people to, informing them, telling them to, inform their members of Congress and urging them to pressure the government to do so. And while it takes, it takes time, I think the people on our side. And another thing that I forgot to mention earlier is, yes, governments have recognized this as genocide. They have, condemned what's happening. They've condemned the Chinese government. And they've engaged in, these diplomatic boycotts. And these are all largely symbolic because there hasn't been anything really meaningful to actually help end this genocide. Like, for example, you could, it started in 2014. You could say it officially started in 2016. And, it's been about 7 years. About 7-8 years since the Chinese government has been interning Uyghurs in concentration camps, forcibly sterilizing them, aborting their babies, harvesting their organs and so forth. Yet nothing meaningful, real constructive action hasn't been done. And the UN is not going to investigate this. Just earlier last week, you had UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet, stating that, she might go visit. The Chinese had given her permission to go visit East Turkestan. on the basis that there's not going to be an investigation. So if there's not going to be an investigation, then her visit will be no different than, the International Red Cross visiting the concentration camps in Theresienstadt, where the Nazis, they took down, the barbed wires and the fencing and the towers, and, they made it look like, a vocational training facility, saying, oh, the Jews are happy, we're not engaging in a Holocaust. And the Chinese government is going to do the same thing. However, there are two, international bodies, that have, treaty bodies that have the mandate to investigate crimes such as genocide and other crimes against humanity. One is the International Criminal Court, and the other is the International Court of Justice. Because East Turkestan is an occupied country, and we are not, defined as, under international law, we're not a sovereign state. We are not a member of the signatory of the ICJ. So we filed a complaint back in June 6th of 2020. And when we mean we, I mean the East Turkistan Government-in-Exile, along with the, the East Turkestan National Awakening Movement, and the general, victims of our diaspora community who are victims of the Chinese communist regime. And we urged the ICC to investigate, Chinese officials for genocide and other crimes against humanity. So if governments, big tech, who have influence, and they care about the Uyghurs and they want to do something, then we, call on all of them to urge the ICC to accept our case and to start investigations either, during the while the Beijing Olympic is taking place, or shortly afterwards, because that's the only way we can, obtain justice. That's the only way that we can meaningfully, stop this genocide. The other way is to engage in humanitarian intervention. And if governments aren't willing to even, I doubt governments are going to be willing to do that. So at the very least, support our case. Let the International, Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice do an investigation. And if China has, if China claims that, they're not engaging in genocide and, there's no concentration camps and Uyghurs are happy, then China has nothing to fear. Let China produce its evidence. Let us produce its evidence, and China will get a fair, fair trial, a fair hearing.
Well, I mean, China's not in the business of fair. Okay. I mean, obviously they're guilty, and obviously they've corrupted and co-opted all of these institutions, whether, our government or these international committees. So it's completely correct for you to be doing these activities. But I like I like what you're saying about taking this to the people. What about this NBA player, this Enes Kanter? Right, and he's been talking about the Uyghur forced labor. Are you in contact with him, or can he help? Right, like kind of propel this message, boycott the Olympics. Are you guys talking?
Enes Kanter Freedom. He recently changed his last name to Freedom as part of becoming a U.S. citizen. He's been very vocal about, the ongoing genocide in East Turkestan, about, Tibet, Hong Kong, and he's been, helping us, all of these communities, to, raise our issue, as well as, call for a boycott of the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics.
I mean, it's impressive what this guy's done. I mean, especially because the NBA is so tied to China, and they get so much money from China. They really have penalized, many employees and players for speaking out. So, I see what Mr. Freedom is doing, and give him a lot of support and props for for taking on those risks. I'm sure it's cost him real money in terms of sponsorships and these other kinds of things. So that's great. So he's on the team. He's calling for the boycott also, it sounds like. How else can people help?
Like, for example, our campaign, that we launched, the, Least Watch the Olympics. Anyone can, whether it's during the Olympics. I mean, the Olympics is about to start on Friday, tomorrow. So even if it's a little late, we can still, print out a piece of paper, with hashtag least watch the Olympics, a short message on why, they're protesting the Olympics, and sharing this on social media and inviting others to, share as well. And this will create a huge impact. While it might, seem small, when you have millions of people doing this, this will create a huge impact. And governments that are, reluctant to act, governments that feel that they don't have the public opinion on their side, will be proven otherwise.
Yeah, I can see that right now. Just you kind of get one of those images and then you put hashtag least watch Olympics. I want to see my Instagram feed just say least watch Olympics all the way down, right?
Exactly. And we've already, been pushing this on various social medias. We've had a lot of great people, supporting it, but we need, people like Enes, Kanter, more, people, in the tech community that, have some influence, that actually care about, human rights, human lives, and human dignity, to join this campaign and make it as viral as we can to, protest what's going on. It's the least that we can do. It's not going to take, it's not going to require a lot of time. Just, a piece of paper with least watch the Olympics, a minute or two of our time. Short and sweet.
Love it. Okay. So last question. And then I think, you've been very generous with your time. What was the thing in the New York Times report which they did not put in, right? You said they didn't even put in the most damning information. What did they kind of whitewash away here?
So one of the things that they whitewashed away is the fact that, Xi Jinping, the Chinese president Xi Jinping, is directly responsible for it. Like, there were secret, documents, internal documents of his speeches that he gave back in 2014, ordering government officials to ensure that, we are, stamped out like, that we are like weeds, and that they need to ensure that, 30% of our population is locked up, and if necessary, 30%, kind of needs to be killed, and the other 30%, they need to, indoctrinate and ensure that they become, loyal Chinese citizens, and by all means, hide this, deny this at all levels, and prevent Uyghurs, whether they're inside or outside, from speaking out about this. It highlights that before, like, in the way it was saying, oh, the regional government did this. Now the regional, the so-called autonomous region government, it can't do anything without, the central government, like Beijing's, approval or command. So this came directly from, Xi Jinping, and they didn't want to, they felt that if they highlighted that fact, it might further upset China. So they tried to, water it down and saying, oh, the regional government, officials at the regional government, they have been implementing this, when it really
it's right from the top.
Yeah.
And I mean, makes no surprise. This stuff does not happen. I've come to realize there's no coincidences in life. This stuff doesn't just happen. Oh, some regional district took this upon themselves. No, it came right from the top. You want to know what else came right from the top? Because I've been reading this book called Ordinary Men, written in the 90s, following this police battalion in the Nazi police force. And it tracks the evolution of this police battalion, which exterminated tens of thousands of Jews, if not more, over their just couple-year tenure doing this. It was actually a very short period of time where the killings, like the mass killings, right? If you look at the total deaths, it was happening for many years, but it escalated dramatically in just a relatively short period of time. And so it tracks the story of this police battalion called, Ordinary Men, and how kind of you do a little bit of something that's bad, and then you do a little bit more, and then you do a little bit more, and then you do a little bit more, and then you do really, really, really bad things. And it kind of just, the psychology of it's so insane. But long story short, those directives, what happened to the Jews and other minorities in World War II came directly from Hitler and Himmler, his lieutenant. This was not, relegated down to some, like regional head who decided to do this. This was directly from the top and then executed in mass. So makes no surprise to me that this comes directly from Xi, and it's just such a travesty. So Salih, thank you so much for coming on today and joining us, sharing some words. We will be doing our best to promote the least watched Olympics along with you. And please stay in touch. Keep us apprised of all your successes in this campaign against these brutal authoritarian dictators. And we'll be right there with you, my friend. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Best of luck to you, sir.